Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we are talking with best-selling author Laura Doyle, who was the perfect wife until she actually got married. So that sounds like an interesting story. Please welcome Laura. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, tell us a little about your story and what led you to doing what it is that you're doing, helping women with their marriages.
Well, I was so happy to marry my husband at first, he was handsome and smart and yeah. And then a few years in, I just saw some things that I thought I could help him improve. I thought I'm going to help him dress a little better and we can eat healthier and I could, like redo his resume for him, help him be a little more ambitious. And so I was giving him all this helpful advice. And for some reason, he just seemed very distant. He was avoiding me. He didn't really want to spend time with me. He was more interested in watching reruns on TV than he was even in making love to me. And I thought, well, that's weird. Something's definitely wrong with him. So I knew that we should go to marriage counseling because everyone knows that is what you're supposed to do if you can't even have a conversation without having a fight. And that's pretty much where we were. So I dragged him to marriage counseling, expecting the counselor to tell him everything he was doing wrong so that I could finally have the happy marriage that I set out to have. And that didn't happen. I remember being on the counselor's gray couch, actually realizing that it was hopeless and we were too far apart. And I was either going to spend the rest of my life in a loveless marriage or I was going to have to get divorced. So I decided to get divorced. But the only problem was I was too embarrassed to get divorced because people had been to the wedding just not that long before that. And so as a last ditch effort, I decided to ask women who were happily married for what seemed like an eternity, which was 15 years. I was asking them for their secrets, like how have you done this? And I thought they were going to say, you have to marry the right person. But they didn't say that. They said things that didn't even really make sense to me. But I was desperate enough. I thought, I'm just going to experiment with their suggestions in my marriage. And I remember I had been doing that for not even that long. And one day I came through the door and my husband's face lit up. He was happy to see me again. And that had been gone. So I thought, okay, something is working here. And I was very excited because I thought, okay, now I know what to do to have that happy marriage that I had wanted so badly. And now, so we're not going to fight anymore. This is going to be really great. I was really inspired. And then I remember not that long afterwards, we were in the car and we had a huge blowout fight. I was saying terrible things and things I knew I'd regret. And he was saying mean, horrible things right back. And we were just right back into that ditch. So, and I thought, how sad is this? Because I knew what to do. And the new way, it wasn't so hard, but it was new. So I had this idea like, okay, I'm going to try to recruit some of my girlfriends that are complaining about their marriage to do this stuff with me. And then that'll maybe give me the structure and the support that I need to have it really stick. And so I did that. I had a little support group in my living room and there were 5 of us. And we were seeing miracles. One woman was like, my husband won the sales contest at work and he took me on the most romantic getaway of our lives. And another one said, this might not seem that big to you guys, but we've been fighting for months about him painting the family room. And he got up and said, I'm going to paint the family room today. And he did. She's like, that's a miracle. So we knew we were onto something. And someone said, can you write this down for my cousin who's in Florida? And we were in California. I said, sure, I'm going to write it down. And I did. And that became my first book, which went directly to the New York Times bestseller list, ended up being published in 19 languages in 30 countries. I never expected all this just from trying to save my own marriage. But we just celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary. And I absolutely have the marriage of my dreams, where he just pulls me in for a kiss because he's passing me in the hallway, or just takes a lot. He takes a lot of pictures of me, like I'm the supermodel that he's been married to for 33 years. So now I'm just on a mission to end world divorce by showing women all the things that those wise women passed on to me, that I didn't know about. I'm from a broken home. I'm from parents who were divorced, and that was the model I was following, and I was getting the same results. So, and I don't know where we're supposed to learn about relationships, but anyway, I just want to make sure everyone gets this information that wants their marriage to last and thrive.
Yeah, it sounds like a really incredible journey and transformation. And I think, the first thing that comes to mind for me, and it sounds like you're more focused on the female side of things, but it's okay. I'll still ask some of the questions. The first thing that comes to mind for me is some curiosity around, at the high level, this journey makes a ton of sense. But I'd be curious about some more of the details or some more of the specifics. And there are a number of places that I think we could dig in, like, hey, what patterns do you see that lead people into the wrong place? Or what did you do to fix it? But since there are so many different areas, I would be curious just sort of where you would like to expand and where you can maybe hone in on a few more details.
Well, I think one of the most fun things for me about this journey has been really realizing that there are 6 intimacy skills, exactly 6, no more, no less, that really contributed. As soon as I learned them, it's like anything else. It's like learning to cook or to play tennis or to drive a car, right? There's, you can show people how to do it. And once they learn, they can become proficient or, to whatever level they want. And so for me, it's just been really fun to pass on. And I could list them. I could just list the 6 intimacy skills, but there's that expression that, just saying the word water doesn't quench your thirst, right? So, we won't have time for me today to teach everybody everything, but there's a couple of them that I think are really exciting and fun to, and so critical. Like everybody really needs to know them, especially wives. And I do come from the wives' point of view, but I have quite a few husbands that are big fans and followers who are really grateful when their wives learn these skills, because I think it helps with him feeling like he's able to be her hero the way he set out to be, right? Husbands set out to be successful. They don't set out to fail in the marriage. No one does, right? Everyone has high hopes on that wedding day. So I think one of the skills that I just really love is expressing your desires in a way that inspires. So I just love to maybe I can kind of go through that a little bit if that sounds would be interesting. Yeah.
Sure. This is an example. Like what does that mean, or what does it
Well, I will start by what Catherine Aird said: if you can't be a good example, you'll just have to be a horrible warning. And so this is my horrible warning story, where my husband actually took me on a trip to Hawaii, but this before we were married even. And I was all excited because we were going to go to the beach, I thought. And then on the first day, instead of saying that I wanted to go to the beach, I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, let's go see a volcano. And I was like, oh, a volcano. Okay, fine. I didn't want to fight about it. So I thought, I'm just going to suck it up. I'll go see his volcano, whatever. But then we're driving in the rental car, and you don't see a volcano for a long time. It was a long drive. So I started to get kind of upset. Like, here we were on this stupid rental car. We could have been at the beach. Anyway, so then he picks up like, something wrong? He's like, is something wrong? And that's when I let him have it. I was like, did you think this would be funny? I don't think it's funny. I think it's stupid. And you didn't even ask me what I wanted to do. And I just lost it, right? And I feel so sad for that earlier version of myself. It just had no concept of how to say what I wanted. And if you can't say what you want, you're never going to get what you want. So he took me to the beach anyway after that, because he just wanted me to be happy. And but I couldn't enjoy it because I had this horrible emotional hangover from losing it. And it took me a long time to really figure this out. I remember even like after I was married, I would say things like, John, this kitchen is a disaster. And I thought he was going to like jump up off the couch and start cleaning the kitchen. And that never happened either. And I think he couldn't even really hear. I think he just heard like, John, blah, 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 blah. And I thought I was saying what I wanted, but I wasn't. I was just complaining. And I think this is a common thing that women fall into. And we think we're expressing our desires, and really our husbands don't have any idea how to make us happy. So there's this formula that I use now, and it's so flippin' effective. I just love it. So I finally learned how to use it. And I remember I said, I would love, that's the beginning of the formula. And then I said, a clean kitchen. I would love a clean kitchen. My husband was like, okay, I'll clean it. And he did. And he's been doing it ever since. And that's been more than 20 years that I never do the dishes because he knows it makes his wife happy. So he's like, I'll do it. And I'm always so grateful. I'm always like, yay, you did the dishes. This is fantastic. Look at this clean kitchen. I love it. And so then he gets to be my hero. I don't have to do the dishes. Win-win. Everyone's happy. All because I learned this little formula. So it does start with I would love. That's the beginning of it. And then the second part is most effective in my experience when it's a final outcome. It's not how it should happen, because I've tried that too. I'd be like, I would love a new dress for my birthday, and there's one on sale. It's at Macy's. It's in the window. It's a blue one. No, but don't wait till it's on sale, or whatever. Like, and then I tell them all the hows, and then it's not. That's not. Yeah, that doesn't. So there's just control, and that was kind of that was kind of the root of a lot of my problems. Was I was very controlling, it turns out, when I first got married. I still am sometimes, but I'm a lot better than I was. And but knowing how to express my desires in a way that inspired was so eye-opening, because instead of trying to control or manipulate to get what I wanted, I found I felt very empowered by being able to just express that desire.
Yeah, I could totally see, when you're coming from oh, I would love this, instead of like, you never cleaned the bathroom, do it, or go clean the bathroom. Kind of
Go
like,
clean the bathroom. Yeah.
It's
I'm
not
sick
gonna
and
come off
tired.
as like something that someone wants to do. I could actually see this maybe working with children too, potentially.
Oh, it does. It works brilliant. I just, as I was the perfect wife before I got married, I'm still the perfect mother because I don't have any children. So as the perfect mother, yeah, it works great with children. but I hear my students talking about it. In fact, this is not an example with children, but I had one student whose marriage was really in trouble. Her husband had already said he wanted a divorce. They were still living together, but they were living together like awkward roommates. And there's no talking, no touching. And he was really like, I'm out. It's not going to happen. So she was using the 6 intimacy skills and the connection framework to try to save her marriage, even though she didn't really think that it could be saved. And so she used this phrase. One day she said, he was sitting watching TV, and she just came out into the living room and said, I would love a leg massage. And so not, oh my God, my legs are so sore, right? Or like that would have been the complaint. I would love a leg massage. And she was shocked because he was like, do you want it right now? And she's like, her heart's racing, like, yeah, okay. And he's like, okay, we'll sit over here. He gave her a leg massage. And that was the beginning of them reconciling, because, just from using that one cheat phrase. We have like 20 cheat phrases, but so it can be really powerful to just express it, to honor it.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like this is at like a higher level, this sort of concept around communicating in a way that makes other people feel good and empowered and inspired is so useful, because I don't know. I guess I don't know where I picked it up from, but I can see a lot of people missed sort of this piece in just all interactions, right? Romantic relationships and friendships and interactions with, like customer service or whatever, everything. And the thing that's crazy to me is you can want or sort of express the same thing, but the way that you do it is so important for the outcome and so important for how the other person ends up feeling, and in the long term, how it impacts the relationship. If you keep using sort of these phrases, like you were saying, that are more like demanding, or they just don't inspire people the right way, in the long term, that really damages the relationship. But in the opposite, you're still asking for the same things. You're just doing it in a way that feels much better. And in the same way, it can deepen the relationship so much. And that's just, I don't know, I have anything extra special to add, except for, to me, how wild it is that you're essentially asking for the same thing. You're just doing it in a way that the outcomes are so much better.
Yeah. Well, you're right. That's a really great point that you're making. And you kind of putting me in mind of the spouse fulfilling prophecy, which is another way that we communicate on our campus that is inspiring, I guess you would say. And the example of this was, I have a lot of horrible warning stories. So I was complaining quite a bit about my husband. Well, I would say I was trying to be encouraging. I would say things like, "Hey, maybe you could ask for a raise, or why don't you see if you can get a promotion, or maybe you could get a better job, right?" And the subtext of all that was like, "You don't make enough money." And that's what he heard. And then I'm such a good manifester. Like he stopped making any money. He wasn't making any money at all. And then I was like seething with resentment because I was the only one making money. And I was already, bitter about that. And that around that time, I had heard an old Nightingale Conant recording of Lee Miltier, and she taught a class on she called it the power of auto suggestion, which is when you say things to yourself like, I ran a marathon, or I have a successful business, like before it's true, right? You're kind of creating it by saying it to yourself. And then she told this story of this student who came and realized like, oh, I've been auto-suggesting stuff to my husband about how he has a bad temper. So she decided she was just going to change it up. And she went home, she waited for him to lose his temper, and she didn't have to wait very long. And then she said, "Oh, that's not like you to lose your temper." And the husband kind of looked at her funny. And then their 12-year-old son said, "Yes, it is, Mom. He always loses his temper," because that's what she'd been saying all this time. But she decided, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm going to stick with my new experiment. And so she kept doing it. And then they were at a restaurant, and the service was really slow. And the husband starts to fume. He's like, "I got a good mind to call the manager over here and tell him how long I've been waiting." And then he stops himself and he looks at her and he goes, "It's not like me to lose my temper, is it?" And she just nearly fell on the floor. She couldn't believe how quickly he saw this new version of himself reflected in what she was saying to him, what she was affirming to him. So I heard that and I thought, well, I'm going to use this. So I decided I was going to change up my spouse fulfilling prophecy with my husband. Instead of "you don't make enough money," I decided to start saying, you've always been a good provider. You've always been a good provider. And then just for fun, I thought, I'm also going to start calling him Mr. Moneybags. And so I did. And then around that time, my husband started his own company. He'd never had his own company before. It was very successful. And it didn't seem like a stretch at all. Very shortly after that, to like, yeah, he was a good provider. He was really doing well. And then, I mean, now it just seems like, yeah, of course he's a great provider. And I still like call him Mr. Money. I got a check in the mail. I'll be like, "Oh, Mr. Moneybags, you can take me out to sushi tonight," or whatever. Like, it's just, it was a playful thing, but it became my reality by choosing my focus and then finding my evidence that he was a good provider. It really changed my whole experience.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I could see it, how it like, it boosts them up and helping them feel like good and empowered themselves. And, it feeds into their self-confidence and self-worth. So I love it. But you had mentioned that you had I know you have 6 tips, but you were going to mention 2. What was the other one that you were gonna talk about?
So we talked a little bit about expressing your desires in a way that inspires. And this is the spouse fulfilling prophecy, which falls under the gratitude skill. Gratitude does double duty because it changes not just how you perceive the other person, because it certainly does that, right? If you're focused on somebody's fault or what they're doing wrong, that's one perception. And if you're focused on what they're doing right, but then they also respond to you so much better. This is why it does double duty. So it falls under that. But I think another good example is, where we ask every student to start on our campus is with making herself happy. And it sounds kind of, and a lot of women arrive on our campus kind of really desperate, feeling like, "No, you don't understand. My marriage is really, really wobbly right now." Right? It is heartbreaking. Actually, we have a lot of women who are feeling really despondent and hopeless about their marriage when they arrive, and we're like, "Okay, well, let's make a list of 20 things that are frivolous fun, and I'm going to ask you to do 3 of them today." And they're like, "No, I can't have any fun. I am too I'm too brokenhearted right now. And we're like, yeah, okay, let's make a list of 20 things. And like, I want you to have some fun, because it turns out, and this was true for me too, you know, I was so miserable in my marriage. I thought I couldn't be happy. But the problem is, only happy people have happy relationships. And he couldn't make me happy. Only I could do that. And I know we've all heard that lots of times, but I didn't really know what that meant. And for me, it was really helpful to just have a practical way of knowing if I did or didn't make myself happy. So I had my little list of 20 things that brought me joy. And I knew if I did 3 of them that day or not. And some of them could be small. Some days are busy, right? You don't always have a lot of time. But it's just so interesting to see. Like I had one student who had 5 children, and her husband was really very distant, and it just seemed like he didn't want to be around her either. He'd even said, I wish we never had kids, and I wish I wasn't married to you, and I'm not attracted to you. Really hurtful things. So she thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to start making myself happy, because she had been spending every weekend waiting for him to say what the plans were going to be. And then she felt like kind of a statue, because she was just waiting for him to plan things. And then he never planned the things that she wanted to do anyway. So she started making her happiness a priority. Like she had these podcasts she loved, and she was listening to those. And one day she was listening to the podcast, and she was folding laundry, she said. And all of a sudden her husband comes over to her, and he wants to talk to her. And she's thinking, wait, I'm listening to my podcast right now. Like, and then she's really like, oh no, okay, I've wanted him to come talk to me. She'd always dreamed of that. And now finally he was. And all she was doing was folding laundry. But she was so happy, it was kind of magnetic. It drew him to her. And then she said she heard her husband talking to their oldest son, and they were like talking like friends. And then he was doing that with all the kids. And she said, either way, I'm winning, because I'm already happier. But I also see that my husband is responding to me so much better. So that's the first place that we always want to invite women to start, is with finding their own happy.
I would say that story really resonates with me. Even though, you know, you've framed it for women, but I can say from my personal experience, like I had a relationship earlier in life when I didn't have much going on, didn't have much fulfilling me or making me happy. And when I was in that relationship, I kind of did sort of the same things that you were talking about, where I sort of deferred all the decisions to my partner, or like prioritized everything around whatever she wanted to do. And I have never been more unhappy or more bitter, right? There's so many times where it's like, oh, you're making this decision. Like, well, since we're in this relationship, like I'll do that for you, I guess, but I wouldn't feel good about it. And now looking back, you know, in the meantime, having developed a lot more skills, hobbies, interests, more of a personality, more of myself. I'm in a relationship now, have been for a while, but it's so much easier to maintain that relationship and the ones in between, and the dating, and all the other stuff, because I have such a better grounded position that I'm coming from. So all that is just to say that I think this definitely applies to men as well, right? If you can make yourself happy, or find the things that make you happy, it makes you not only happier in general, right? But also a better partner. And it's easier to sort of stay in a relationship, at least in my experience, because you're not pinning everything on the other person, right? You have more agency around sort of some of your emotions and whatnot, as opposed to, I hope they make the decision that I want them to make so that I can be happy.
Right.
Exactly. That never works. Yeah. And it's amazing how easy it is to fall into that, right? Where you're just deferring, you kind of almost outsourcing your own happiness to your partner, instead of being, and really the relationship's so much more exciting when you both have your own interests and bring those back. Like I love to play volleyball, and I go play volleyball on Saturday mornings, and it just makes me ridiculously happy. And then my husband loves to run, so he goes running on Saturday mornings, and then we come back and we both have something interesting to talk about. We're both full of endorphins, and it seems like just a great way to connect. But if he was out running and I was just waiting for him to come home, yeah, I'd be like, this sucks. So yeah, I'd probably be mad at him, like you say, bitter. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, that's definitely a concept we have emphasized on our podcast of just like, happiness has to come within yourself. If you're depending on happiness or waiting on someone else to provide you happiness, then it's just really setting yourself up or your relationship up for kind of like a disappointment, because it's like, yeah, both. And if you're a happy person and you find those joys within yourself and not necessarily reliant on that other person, it definitely can be, like you said, magnetic or more attractive and someone you want to be around. It's like it's a happy person. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something we talk about on the campus a lot, is like, you are never going to be hotter to your husband than when you are dancing and singing and laughing and smiling and just having a good time. Like, that is actually the best beauty cream that never came in a jar. if you really want to be attractive. And I think that is kind of a big I know it was a big value of mine. I wanted to feel desired. I couldn't understand why my husband wasn't desirous, but I look back now and, like, I look like this most of the time, like, right. And then after I started making myself happy, I'm like, hi, how are you? I was, then, I looked more like a supermodel to him, apparently. So, yeah, if you ever want to look like a supermodel, that's what you have to do, is just, get that authentic smile going.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that this actually was applicable to me when I was single before I met my husband, in that, like, I had just ended a long-term relationship. There was a period of time where I was single and dating, and I just decided to focus more on my own happiness and creating joy for myself. And I think that ended up being more attractive than me being like, oh, he's got to check my boxes and all these things. And then, like, you got to hit this, instead of just me like, I'm just going to have fun. That attracts the right partner. Great. And it did. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, because like attracts like, right? So you were just putting out like, oh, I'm feeling good, I'm happy. And he wanted to pile on, probably. He wanted to get some of that. So it makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a little bit of a follow-up question on some of the pieces that I heard around. I sort of heard you mention a couple times like a mismatch in ambition at certain points, right? Between like sort of the ambition that you had, or at least that you wanted to see. And I'd be curious if you have thought about or had some like experience with what to do in situations where values are mismatched, because it sounds like, some of the steps, and maybe it's hidden in the other four we didn't talk about that we don't have time for, but some of those steps seem really good for sort of enhancing a relationship. But I'm curious what happens if you enhance your relationship and find there are things, deep at the core that are still mismatched, even if you're able to, like, okay, we're getting along, we're being nice to each other, but like, anyway, that ambition is sort of the piece that sparked that. And I'd be curious what your thoughts are in that realm.
Yeah, I love that question, because I'll tell you, when I first started doing this work, really just to save my own marriage, that's all I was trying to do. I kind of thought the same thing. Like, there's certain guys that's like, this won't work if you have, somebody's really got addiction or something like that, or if he's, big time cheater, all those things that are really deal breakers in marriage. And so I was really scared to like show women, like give them the skills in those situations. So I'm like, oh, you gotta make sure you're safe or whatever. But I've gotten schooled since then by a lot of my students who, for whatever reason, they weren't going to leave, right? They had kids, or financially or whatever. They just decided, hey, I'm going to stay in this marriage, so I might as well try this intimacy skills stuff and see what happens. And I ended up interviewing on my own podcast a husband of a student who was 18 months sober when I interviewed him. And he said it's because he gave all the credit. He goes, I give all the credit to my wife for really changing the culture of our home by using these intimacy skills. So previous to the skills, she'd been saying, you drink too much, you got to stop drinking. Why do you, I think you're an alcoholic. And he said in the podcast, he said, yeah. So I thought, okay, fine. You want me to drink less? I'm going to drink more. Like, it was just, he was contrary. Like, and I'm the same way, right? Yeah. I'll be reading a recipe and it's like, cut the onions small. I'm like, don't tell me what to do. Right. Like, I'm just, I have this contrary nature. Mm-hmm. So, and he was the same way. And I think it's kind of part of being a human in a way, right? A lot of us don't want anyone to tell us what to do. So, and then as she began to use the intimacy skills, and a big part of it is deciding to trust the person you married, right? It's to decide, like, I picked a good person. I wouldn't have married a jerk or I know there's a good man in there. And so, and I know spouse fulfilling prophecy is kind of part of this, like really choosing to focus on the good stuff about them. And so one of the things that she did, and this can sound nutty, and it is kind of nutty, she decided she was going to give him control of all the finances in their home as a family, even though she thought he was a drunk. And she did that. And she's like, yeah, I trust you. And I'm sure you're going to do a good job with this. And, she kind of decided to make him, like she was going to follow his lead with that. And he said it just did something to him where he felt like, okay, like I've got to be responsible now. Like now I want to be sober. I want to show up as the good husband I see my wife focusing on that's in me, right? I think it's that expression that you kind of tend to get what you expect from people, and she was expecting the best and being very respectful, which that's another one of the skills that we talk about. Like I thought I was being respectful, except for the way he drove and the way he dressed. And, there were just several things that I was totally disrespectful about. So I kind of had a blind spot about that. And so did this student, Melissa. But it was just really mind blowing to be on the podcast and having him say that because of her practicing the intimacy skills, he not only was 18 months sober, he'd lost 80 pounds and was now coaching the kids football and handling all the money for the, and his business had taken off. And so it's really kind of remarkable that, I think sometimes we limit ourselves thinking we don't have the power. Like there's a mindset there, right? That like, oh, he's always going to be broken. That was my mindset on that great couch at the counselor's office, right? It's like, he's never going to change. And it was like, oh, actually, I'm the one that's got the power to change this relationship. The joke's on me. Mm-hmm. And then once I did, now I'm married to the man of my dreams. So, and my student, Melissa, I think would tell you the same thing about her husband, Matt.
Beautiful. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it sounds like, people can end up in such deeply unproductive patterns that by sort of learning some of these skills and unwinding them, you can almost find yourself with an entirely new partner. I mean, that's not the case, right? It's more about, changing the patterns and enhancing the things that you want and breaking out of things that are detrimental to the relationship. But it sounds like in some of these cases, you can have so much change in the way that you interact that something that seems like an irreconcilable value difference is actually just a series of unfortunate habits and patterns that have developed between you.
Yes, Donovan, I think that's a great way to explain it, because it's changeable, right? There's always a possibility to experiment and see if you can get a different response, a better response by showing up as your best self. Yeah, which might be somebody who, instead of criticizing or, and it was interesting to find out like that I'm being helpful in wife language was actually critical in husband language. Right? So I was like, oh, so I was being critical and that wasn't working. Who would have thought, right? I was blaming him and for my unhappiness, and that wasn't working. So it was, it's been just the best self-improvement project I've ever undertaken, is trying to save my broken marriage, because that the wisdom of getting married, so I didn't have any easy escapes without the embarrassment of divorce, really forced me to go through that door that's marked, self-awareness and accountability. And I don't think I would have gone through it any other way. I thought I was doing fine. I thought I was a good wife. So even just from the standpoint of, it's like Maya Angelou says, I wouldn't trade nothing for my journey now. I'm just so grateful I had a broken marriage. So I ended up having to do these exercises, these experiments that have made me into a better Laura.
Love it. Great. Well, Laura, we really appreciate you joining us on our show. Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to plug or share before we do?
Yeah, I have something fun going on right now. I have the Adored Wife Roadmap available for free on my website, lauradoyle.org. You can download that right now. And then when you do, it kind of leads to some other stuff too that I could share with you about my story that I can't just tell anybody. So if you go, to lauradoyle.org, you can get the Adored Wife Roadmap, or you can listen to my podcast, The Empowered Wife, wherever podcasts are available on YouTube, iTunes, all those good places, Spotify.
Awesome. Yeah, check it out. We'll put the links in the description below, and go check out her website, lauradoyle.org. And if you want to learn more or get her book, The Empowered Wife.
Oh, yeah, good one. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Of course, yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and spread the happiness in the world. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.